Good afternoon and welcome again. Today we are talking about how you can boost donor engagement with automated reports. My name is Diane Otero. I am a product marketing manager here at Bloomerang. Prior to being with Bloomerang, I served on the board of the Nantahala Hiking Club, one of 31 trail maintaining clubs of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, which is a nonprofit organization driven and powered by volunteers. Here's what we are going to talk about today. Of course, the main topic of today is reporting and analytics, but I want to talk about, first of all, we all know why reporting is important to the work that we do, but today we're specifically going to talk about how you can automate activities around reporting so you can take that time back and spend it working on increasing your donor engagement, increasing your donor retention, spending that time you're going to get back toward your mission. A couple of reports that we're going to take a look at today are around donor identification and cultivation, donor engagement, sharing financial outcomes, and we'll do some wrap and Q&A at the end. We're going to do today's webinar a little bit differently. In the past, you may be used to, we are putting a lot of the best practices up front, and we'll do a demo afterwards. For today, we'll kind of jump in and out based on which topic that we're going to talk about. We'll also pause for a couple of questions in between. So don't be shy about those questions. As soon as you have a question, you can type that into the Q&A. And if we don't get to all of your questions, don't worry. I'll make sure we send you a follow-up via email. All right, so first, why scheduling reports? And I talk about scheduling the reports. This might be different, or this might be called differently depending on the CRM that you're using. But in Bloomerang, we use the term scheduling reports. And now, why would you want to do this? We all know it takes a lot of effort to remember everything that you or others should be doing to ensure you're taking the best care of your constituents. And we believe that automating some, if not a lot of this work is essential. And once you have those reports scheduled, you don't have to think about it every month. It just happens automatically. And a big part of this too is, well, we know a lot of nonprofits out there are small 1 to 2 person shops. And it isn't very efficient to keep doing these tasks over and over if these are reports that you routinely or frequently send out on a schedule. If you can have these go out on schedule for you, it takes some of that burden away from you. Also, not everyone at your organization needs to know how to run reports. You might have a handful of folks, even if you're a larger organization, you might have a handful of folks who are really experts in the database or the CRM that you're using, but not everyone is. And you can't expect everyone to learn the reporting system in the same depth as you would normally if you were day in and day out in the database. So scheduling the reports allows you, if you're the one creating those reports, the freedom to just send those out without having to download a lot of that information to make that happen. Also, this allows you to get the data and information into the hands of people who actually need it without having to log into your CRM. So you could have, for example, board members, volunteers who you don't necessarily need to be able to log into your CRM on a regular basis, but they do need access to that information. This way you can create that information, send the relevant information to the relevant people so they can take action on it. So consider these reports. And as we go through this, we're going to show you some samples of what we think some of these reports under these categories look like. For example, in terms of donor identification, we're going to take a look at a constituent engagement report, looking at constituents who may be engaged with your organization, but have never financially supported or haven't given to your organization yet. We'll also take a look at high potential donors. So these could be donors who have a higher capacity to give that you may not be aware of, but could give more to your organization. We'll also take a look at some reports around cultivation and stewardship. For example, when we think about cultivation and stewardship, this is around moves management. So if you had prospect managers or solicitors, you could send them a report regularly of what the moves management or what the moves are looking like within your database, or at least on the activities recorded within your database. We'll also take a look at donor recognition. Of course, this is very important as you're engaging with your constituents and working toward retaining your donors. We'll take a look at a donor call report, as well as donors who might be in need of a personal follow-up, or even donors who haven't been acknowledged yet or have unacknowledged gifts. We'll also take a look at recapturing lapsed donors. We don't want to lose the work that has gone into cultivating those relationships with the donors. We want to make sure that we are capturing them before they lapse. But if it does happen, we want to make sure that we have a plan in place to recapture those lapsed donors. Lastly, we'll take a look at some reports you can run around sharing financial outcomes. Perhaps you want to run something like a fiscal year comparison report, which again, you can schedule to go out to the proper stakeholders. And of course, there's more. What we'll be showing you today is just a sampling of what we think the reports are that you can run and automate, again, to take this off your plate and focus more on the activities that will move the needle in terms of donor engagement and donor retention. So first report that we'll take a look at here is a constituent engagement report. So you want to find constituents who are engaged with your organization, but maybe they just haven't given to your organization yet. In Bloomerang, what we call an engagement score, and there's several factors that go into this. It's based on a proprietary formula created by Dr. Adrian Sargent, who's a leading industry expert on donor engagement and retention. The engagement level takes into account a variety of factors, including giving history, upgrades and downgrades in giving, soft credits, constituent communication preferences, volunteer engagement, and other constituent-initiated and organization-initiated interactions. And I want to call that out here because I know some of you folks may not be using Bloomerang yet. Now, what other things in your CRM or in your database or even within your organization would you define as a constituent being engaged with your organization? And again, we make the distinction here of this doesn't just pertain to giving. And giving does factor into Bloomerang's engagement score, but there are other ways that constituents can give to your organization. Maybe they give time in terms of volunteering. They aren't as active with volunteering, but they always open your emails. All of these factor into engagement. So think about all those factors that aren't necessarily just giving, that gives you a signal to your organization that this constituent is supporting your organization and maybe, could be primed for an ask if cultivated properly. So we're going to jump into Bloomerang and take a look at how we can run this type of report. So let's pull up a constituent so we can take a look at their engagement level. So I have this constituent in my database, and it is showing us her engagement level. The engagement level goes from cold, cool, warm, hot, and on fire. As you can see, there isn't a lot going on in this constituent's timeline. So currently their engagement level is cold. The more information you have about the constituent in terms of how they're engaging with your organization. Again, if you're recording those volunteer activities, if you're sending them those emails, if you can track that they're opening those emails or responding to those emails, if they're giving, if they're inquiring, if they attend your events or tours, anything like that, any touch point that you would have with the donor, all of that will factor into their engagement level. And as you record those activities, you'll see that engagement level go higher, or hopefully you will. Now, let's go to our report, because that's a big focus of what we have today. I actually already have a pre-built report here for our engaged constituents who haven't donated yet. We'll take a look at that, and then I'll show you how to build that out as well. So here I'm looking at constituents whose engagement level is warm, hot, and on fire. So that's about the upper half in terms of the engagement level, and they don't have any transactions yet. I'm also excluding constituents whose status is inactive or any type of organization. So for my purposes today, I'm just looking at individuals. Lucky for me, I don't have anyone right now. So presumably for my pretend database here, everyone in my database who is highly engaged has already given. Now, again, earlier I said you can take a look at what does engagement mean to you. If you don't have that engagement level, or if you're tracking it a different way, you can always factor that in. But a key thing that we want to point out here is Bloomerang aggregates all that information for you so that you don't have to think about each of those individual factors. You can go by your engagement level. And as you're defining what that means for your organization as well, you can adjust these parameters. So for example, instead of just saying, show me anyone whose engagement level is warm, hot, and on fire, and instead of just no transactions, maybe I have a certain amount in mind. Maybe, for example, instead of has no transactions, I can take a look at the number of gifts. So I can say here, for example, has at least one transaction, or more appropriately for this one, maybe they've only given once before. So they are highly engaged with my organization, but they've only ever given once. What can we do to get them to give again? Or what can we do to get them to give on a more regular basis if your goal is around recurring giving? Perhaps it's by amount. So let's say the calculated, which is going to give us the sum of their total amount. Let's say anyone who's given less than $250. Maybe they have high engagement with our organization, but they haven't given very much. And again, that much depends on how does your organization define this. So what's really nice about this is you can tailor this to what your organization really needs and to coincide with what your organization's goals and objectives are. Another thing I like to point out here is this toggle around household and constituent. So in Bloomerang, you can enter constituents individually, but you can also put them in a household. I love this household feature because perhaps I have giving on my account and perhaps I have giving on my husband's account. When you take a look at the household, it takes a look at that complete picture of the household, not just the individuals within that household. Now, this is not to mean that it won't include anyone who isn't in a household. It will also include them, but it gives you just a bigger picture of that, or the more complete picture of the household as opposed to the individual parts. Now, in terms of scheduling, that's a big focus of what we're doing today. We're going to click Save and then Schedule Report. So let's say I have this report of constituents of engaged constituents who haven't donated or have only donated X amount of times or X number of gifts, or have only donated a certain amount. Let's go ahead and rename that. and then we'll schedule it. When you schedule the report, you can select the frequency. So if this is something that I would like to take a look at daily, weekly, or monthly, again, based on the capacity of your organization, you can schedule that based on your needs. So let's say we want to take a look at this monthly. It's going to ask you what day of the month you'd like it to be sent and what time of the day you would like it to be sent. So let's say for this one, we want it sent out first thing in the morning. And this is where we were talking about where even if a colleague doesn't have access to your Bloomerang database, you can still send them this report. They can still get the information and take action on the information that's included. If you click on the recipients, it's automatically going to pull up a list of your users within Bloomerang, but not to worry, if there's someone in there that you would also like to receive this report, you can just go ahead and start typing their email address in there to make sure that they get the report. Let's do that again. A subject is required, of course, so you want to let them know what report this is. And let them know what action should we do with this as well. Perhaps you want to give them a call. Perhaps you want to include them in an email nurture series. What is the action that you want to take with these constituents? And this can vary as well depending on who you're sending it to, how many might be on the list. And you can kind of segment that further if you need to. So for this particular email, let's say we want to include them in our email nurture series. And you can even select a checkbox here of if there's no results for that month, don't send that email. Now, it is possible, of course, when the email goes out, the report goes by what is the snapshot of what the data looks like at the point that it is being sent out. So perhaps if this report gets sent out next month and we've taken action on those constituents included in that report and their behavior changes and they give more, they won't be included in the next month's report anymore. So this is dynamic, and the report filters take a look at what is the actual date and time that you're sending the actual email. So we'll go ahead and click that and say, if there are no results, don't send that email. And then we'll click Save and Schedule. So when you're looking at the report here, it's showing you that this report goes out monthly on the 1st at 9 a.m. And if we go back to the report list as well, you can see that noted here, and you can even filter by the status. So you can ask the database, show me all the reports that are scheduled to go out or that are on an active schedule. This is a great idea to check, before you create a whole new report that you want to schedule out, what reports do we actually have that's already going out, and to whom? And that's kind of a quick overview of how the scheduling the report goes. If you want to make any changes, you can always open the report again and click Edit Report Schedule and make additional changes. Perhaps we hired a new individual to help us with our engagement efforts. We can add them to the email. Perhaps we might want to change the frequency. Any changes you want to make to the schedule of the report, you can make that, and then you can save and schedule. If perhaps this report is a little less useful, you've tried it and you want to try a different approach, you can always delete the schedule. Deleting the schedule doesn't delete the report itself. You're always going to have access to that. It just stops sending the report out. I'm going to take a look at quick questions that we have here for now. There's a question, will you send the recording once we are done? Absolutely. Everyone who registered is going to receive an email with a link to the recording as well as the slides. Thank you for that question. All right, another report that we want to take a look at for you is our high potential donors. Now, this is a little bit special because we actually have a report template built out for this. So you don't need to build this out from scratch. This shows you the constituents or this takes a look at the generosity score and as well as the engagement score to find potential donors or donors with a higher giving potential that might be hiding in plain sight right within your database. So I'm going to cancel out here. And while we're in this section, I also wanted to show off a couple of the report templates that we have pre-built. Again, we're all about saving you time so you can spend that time on your engagement efforts and your retention efforts as opposed to your administrative tasks. So if you're looking at running reports, there might be a couple of reports in here that you may not have thought of as well that it's good to consider. For example, we have a report template on loyal donors, top donors, newest donors. Any report that you can build in Bloomerang, you can schedule out. So you can think about, okay, these are the reports that we have. What do we want to do? What is the purpose for us sending these reports out, and what is the action we want to take in relation to the constituents in this report? For example, as I mentioned, let's take a look at our high potential donors. Now, I mentioned earlier our high potential donors. This says donors with both a high engagement score and a high generosity score. We took a look at the engagement score earlier. Now let's take a look at the generosity score. And what does that mean? Okay, so if we take a look at this constituent, we see that their generosity score is on fire. The generosity score is based on information from Donor Search, which is a wealth prospecting tool. So individual constituents in Bloomerang have a generosity score on their summary screen, which shows the overall rating for this constituent. This unique score takes into account a wide range of information, such as wealth markers, real estate holdings, and philanthropic history in order to deliver a quality indicator of potential giving. It's widely known that the best indicator of future giving is past giving, so that factors into this as well. It doesn't just take a look at the wealth indicators, but the giving indicators as well. And this mirrors our engagement level. So we have cold, cool, warm, hot, and on fire, similar or the exact same as our engagement level. And these scores are built in to the Bloomerang database. So this comes free with all standard databases. There are higher levels of that you can buy that gives you additional information, but the generosity score itself is built into Bloomerang. And I love comparing these two because you can take a look at the engagement level and the generosity level together. And that's what we'll take a look at here in a report. But you can see for this constituent, for example, so generosity factors in overall giving, not just to your organization. So just by comparing the engagement level and generosity score, it already tells you a little bit about the constituent. If you have a constituent who might be at the cold engagement level but is on fire in terms of generosity, this might be a signal that this constituent has a higher capacity to give and has proven capacity to give in the past. They may not be giving to your organization. You may not have fully tapped into that. Conversely, you may have a constituent who has a high engagement level with your organization, but a lower generosity level. They may not have a long giving history overall, but they have a very high engagement and they're very engaged. They're very committed to your organization. Or you'll have a constituent like this that's high in both. Let's take a look at how that plays out. In our report template, we are going to take a look at our high potential donors. So we are looking at donors with both a high engagement score and a high generosity score. So this is going to show us constituents. Right now, we are at an or. So either they have a high engagement level, they're very engaged with your organization. We are not factoring in yet what their generosity is, but they have a high level of engagement with your organization, or their generosity is hot and on fire. So they can meet either of these criteria. And this report is saying that if they meet either of these criteria, these might be good to cultivate for an ask. I do want to point out here too that with our filtering system, you can drag and drop filters. So right now, again, we're taking a look at or. They just need to meet one of these criteria. Either they have high engagement or they have high generosity. If we want to take a look at both, I can easily drag and drop this filter so that it's side by side, and now they need to meet both criteria in order to be within this report. So again, going back to what is your objective and what do you want to do with these constituents, and that can help you further define what your segments are. But you can easily try to play around, right? So I also try to take a look at it of, okay, if we're looking at engagement level is hot or on fire, or generosity is hot and on fire, I have 50 households showing up. What is our bandwidth and our appetite for engaging these 50 households? If perhaps we only have one person who will be performing an action with these constituents, maybe we might need to narrow that down and adjust our criteria. If this is a good number, or we are happy with this number, maybe this tells us, hey, if we have 50, maybe we need more help. Maybe we can split the engagement up between 2 or 3 people. That can help inform your strategy as well. Again, going back to what is your goal? If you have these constituents who you know have high potential, what do you want to do with them? What do you have lined up so you can harness that potential? Once you have that report, scheduling the report is the exact same. I'll have to name the report first, of course, and then schedule how often do I want to be engaging with these constituents. Perhaps this one, we have a campaign coming up, so I want to make sure to check this report weekly and see how the needle is moving on a weekly basis. We'll say that goes out, let's say at the end of the week, somewhere toward the middle of the day, perhaps. Again, you can customize that for whatever you'd like. Because these are high potential donors, maybe I do want to require Bloomlearn login because maybe I want someone to be able to log in to the database and look at the engagement and generosity score, or perhaps we have prospect view or batch screening with donor search that gives us additional information, and I want them to be able to click on that from the database. I can require Bloomlearn login, in which case, again, you can choose which users in your database send this report, put in your subject, and really I like to add the content, be specific, what is the action we want to take with these donors so they can take action on it. For example, give these donors a phone call, invite them to an upcoming event. Whatever you have lined up, go ahead and put as much detail as you can there. Again, if there's no results, don't send an email so it's not confusing if someone's receiving a blank spreadsheet. and then we can save and schedule. Again, I don't have to worry about that. We've talked about what our strategy is. We've gone in here, we've determined that these are the factors we want to consider, and this report just goes out automatically. I don't have to remind someone to run these reports on a regular basis. I don't have to remember to do it myself. I can just put all the notes in the content, and they'll get all of that right in their inbox. I have a question here. These high generosity engagement scores are built-in algorithms within Bloomerang, correct? That is correct. They are built into Bloomerang. So you don't have to worry about calculating all of that manually. It does that for you, and you can report on all of that as well. Great question. Now let's move on to cultivation and stewardship. Another report that I like sending out is a moves management scorecard, taking a look at what are the recent moves that happened with this constituent and what are the next steps that we need to do. This is great because once you've identified these constituents, it informs your prospect manager or your solicitor and gives them a reminder of what they need to do next. The nice thing about Bloomerang too is if there is a field that we don't track by default, you can create custom fields to house that information in Bloomerang. For example, in terms of moves management for my pretend database, this is the information that I'm tracking. Who's their prospect manager? At what stage are they? What is the ask amount? What's the last action date, type? What is the next action date and type? And the nice thing about all of these things is any of these fields, including custom fields, you can include as a column in that report. Again, you can use this report to go to anyone in your organization, whether or not they have a login to your Bloomerang database. So you want to include as much of the information or all of the information that they need in the report to take action or to take the action that you want them to take. I want my prospect manager to have visibility. What's the next action date? What's the next action type? I don't want them to have to go into the database to find that information. If the next action type is to give them a phone call, I want to include a column for the phone number. So again, all of the information that they need in order to complete that desired action is already contained in the report and already contained in the email. I have a pre-built report here as well for my moves management report. I think I might have one. I'm filtering this specifically for the next action date is next month. Now, as I mentioned, you can add your custom fields or add as much information in the report as the person needs in order to complete that action. So maybe I want to include my prospect manager, prospect stage, and you can multi-select all of these fields as well, and they're going to be added to the report in the order that you clicked on them. So perhaps I want last action date, type, and next action date and type. So let's go ahead and add those columns. So again, we're seeing a next action type here of phone call. So I likely want to include their phone number. We will add that as well. So you can see very clearly here, once they get that report, it comes in spreadsheet form. Once they get that spreadsheet, it's going to have their next action as well as the information they need to complete that action. If there's other information that you're tracking that would be helpful when my prospect manager makes this phone call, I'm going to add that as a column in this report as well. If we had more showing up here, I can also group it by prospect manager. So I can create a report by prospect manager, or I can just create one big report and group it by prospect manager so that each constituent is listed under their prospect manager. and just have that one email going out to all of them, and they can take action on their respective prospects. Now, why is this important, right? Why are we doing this? We are big proponents at Bloomerang of donor retention and donor engagement, and this shows you the impact that can happen as you're retaining your donors year over year. The average retention rate, especially for first-time donors in the industry right now, is at 20%. If you can get them to a second gift, that jumps higher. If you can take a look at just if you improve your donor retention rate by 10, it gives you so much more in revenue and so much more in savings from having to acquire those new donors if you're continuing that engagement and retention movement. And it also speaks towards sustainability as well. If you're increasing your donor retention year over year, in this example on the left, by 10 years, by year 10, this organization is down to 2 donors. If we can get that number up from 41 to 51, that goes up to 14. And again, that's your starting point of 5,000. So you may be asking yourself, how many donors do we have right now? What is our donor retention rate? How are we engaging with these donors so that we keep retaining them and they become lifelong advocates of our organization? If you can do that and incrementally increase your donor retention year over year, you're going to see those savings go up. I've also linked here, you're going to receive a copy of the slides. I linked a blog post that talks more about this as well. Now, why, as we go into talking about donor, cultivation and stewardship, why is a personal follow-up important? We've built a reporting system and given our customers the ability to schedule reports to ensure that you are following up with your donors properly, because that's absolutely necessary in order to retain them. Now, you may be asking yourself, what actions should I be taking to retain my donors? We have some information that will help inform you how to spend your time and which reports are the most helpful as part of your donor retention strategy. Before we get into the reports, we want to show you the data behind the reports that we are recommending you build. First, we took a look at the data of phone calls to first-time donors, and we found that phone calls to first-time donors increases donor retention, it increases the speed to the second gift, and it increases the average gift amount. So we took a look at, this is data from actual Bloomerang customers, where we take a look at customers or nonprofits who did not receive or did not give a phone call to first-time donors, retained about 33.01%. Those that gave those that gave just one phone call, that number jumped up to 41.24%. And if they gave more than one phone call within the first 90 days of that first gift, it jumped up to 58.21%. So engaging with your constituents via phone call works. Also, their speed to second gift, or their second gifts were given sooner. Those that did not receive a phone call, on average, it was 261 days before they gave their second gift. For those that received one phone call, that number went down to 217 days. Whereas those that received more than one phone call, the time to the second gift went down to 53. From 261 to 217 to 53, that is a big jump. So you can imagine what impact is that going to make to your organization if you can get to that second gift within 53 days as opposed to 261 days. We've also found that their second gift on average was bigger. For those that did not receive a phone call, the next gift on average was $50. For those that received a second one phone call, that went up to 100, and for more than one phone call, it stayed at 100. So again, this is telling us that the phone calls, especially to first-time donors, they are more likely to give again if they receive a phone call. Their second gifts were given sooner, and their second gifts tended to be larger than if they didn't receive a phone call. Another thing we want to point out here, and again, this is data from actual Bloomerang customers. We took a look at what our Bloomerang customers were doing and what the results and outcomes were as a result of those actions. In terms of phone calls, those that made a phone call enjoyed a 17.73 increase, whereas those that didn't, they actually decreased for 14.67%. For those that sent personal emails, the increase that we saw was 9.86, and the decrease was 27.52. For in-person interactions, and again, this could be we track this based on in-person interaction, whether that happened actually in person or virtually, saw a 17.44% increase if they did record an interaction with their constituents, and a 6.05 decrease if they didn't. So this is showing us that the personal touch works. The more personal that interaction is, the higher the gains that you'll see. So you can see here phone calls, and what we've also found is this isn't just actual phone calls where you get to talk to someone. Voicemails work as effectively as well. I know based on generations or individual preferences, some people are more likely to pick up the phone and some people aren't. It doesn't matter if they do. Donors appreciate the phone call that they receive from your organization. It shows them that you care about them, that you recognize them as donors, and their contribution to your organization is valuable. Now that we've known now that we've seen some of the outcomes that can happen if you should be doing this, how else can Bloomerang help you take action? Before we take a look at a few of the donor recognition reports, I want to take a minute to share with you how our iOS app can help quickly connect with donors. So if you're currently if you're a Bloomerang customer, you can download our app for free. We have an iOS app and an Android app. Our first-time donors is available on iOS. It's going to be coming out on Android soon. But if you have the app, you can quickly have access to an activity feed where you can refresh this in real time. Just swipe down, and this refreshes real time based on the gifts that are coming into your organization, coming into your database. And then we also have the first-time donor calls list here. So for example, let's say I'm a board member of an organization. If I'm going to make a phone call or send a personal email to the donor, I find it much easier and much quicker to use my mobile phone using the mobile app for that, since I make all my phone calls and send all my personal emails from my phone anyway. It is the exact same Bloomerang database that you would access if you were logging into the web, but I have those high-level features on my phone that I can take quick action right away. I don't have to wait to get to my computer to take that action. I can log into the app, refresh my activity feed, check out if there's any first-time donors that I can give a phone call to, and just call straight from my app. Now this prompts you, this is nice because it already prompts you, but not everyone has a smartphone, or not everyone uses their phone in that way. So we also do have some recommended reports that you can run and send out to people's inbox so they can take those actions. One is just very simple. your donor call report. These are donors who gave last week, but have not yet received a phone call. And again, this is why, or you've seen why we recommend making that phone call. These are the best types of phone calls to make because you're not necessarily asking them for anything at all. You're just saying thank you for your gift. Now, when you go into Bloomerang, you actually already have your first-time donors or your donor calls highlighted here. I don't have any at the moment, but any first-time donor that or any constituent who gives for the first time is going to appear in this donor call list, and you can assign a task to someone for them to be given a call, or you can give them a call yourselves. Now, that does look at some criteria, but maybe you might want to widen that search. And again, we have a couple of starter templates here to help with that. For example, a starter template that we have here is first-time donors from the last 90 days. Let's take a look at that. So this looks at any individual whose first gift occurred in the previous 90 days. And again, I love this household feature here where, if you're going by constituent, you're going by the individual level, but maybe I've just been added to the database. For example, I just signed up to receive your email newsletters, so I don't have any giving on my timeline, but my husband has been giving, so our household has been giving. So instead of seeing me as a new donor or as a new constituent, you can take a look at it at the household level. And you can avoid that potentially awkward conversation of, thank you for making your first gift, when in fact our household has been giving before. So you can create this report. So these are individuals whose first gift happened in the last 90 days. And I have additional information here from what their first transaction date was. I even have a column here that I'm adding. Have they made their first, or have they received their first time thank you call yet? The dashboard goes by within the last 7 days, so we're extending that time frame here to 90 days. Hey, I have 11 folks here. It's a great thing I went ahead and ran this report today, but we want to catch those donors right away when it happens so we can give them that phone call right away. So again, I can schedule this report. I can name it however I want, make it descriptive, schedule that report. Maybe I want to make those phone calls go out weekly or monthly or even daily. It's up to you. Send that out to the people who you want to perform that action. In the content, describe the action that you want them to take. Please give these donors a phone call. And save and schedule that. So even if that's something that you schedule weekly, for example, at the end of the day, so they can give a phone call and then give you an update the next day once they've performed the action. We'll click out of this for the moment. The scheduling process is the same because I wanted to show you other reports that you want to consider automating as well. So we took a look at donors who gave based on that report template. Any donors that are in need of a personal follow-up. And how we're defining that here for my organization is current donors who haven't received a personal touch in the last 90 days. And we're doing that because staying engaged with your current donors prevents them from lapsing. So you want to reach out to them every 90 days. Now, again, that will change based on your organization. Maybe you have more bandwidth or more appetite and you want to decrease that number to 60 days, or you want to, again, based on your bandwidth and appetite, increase that to 120 days. You can adjust that based on what your goals are and what your capacity is. Remember, just because the outreach is personal, just doesn't mean you can't have a template for some of the messaging. So you can use a call or email template to make it easier on yourself and to other staff members as well, especially if you're asking them to perform this action, make it easier for them to do so. At the end of the slides today, which again, you're going to get a copy of the slides, we have some resources to help. And even if you can't reach out to all donors every 90 days, try to make it a point to reach out to, start out with a small number, 5% more each quarter, 10% more each quarter. And as you do that more frequently, you'll see the number that you need to reach out to go down to a more manageable number. Another thing, we talked a lot about phone calls and personal interactions. We also wanted to show that, in terms of donor recognition, you can do something simple, again, based on your bandwidth and your appetite. Thank you letters improve outcomes as well. And again, this is based on actual Bloomerang customers. Donors who received thank you letters had better retention rates and better revenue retention than their peers who didn't send a letter. So figure out what that can look like for your organization. And if it's phone calls, letters, emails, what's an optimal combination for your organization to be able to do this? Another report that we like recommending is the donor acknowledgement report. Any donor that has any gift that hasn't been thanked yet, get on that right away. Create a report, and you might be missing some of those, and that's why we point this out. There are still some that might fall through the cracks and not get recognized. Run a report for those and schedule that report out. That way you catch them right away, and it doesn't go so long before they actually get that recognition and that thank you that they deserve. Okay, in terms of recapturing lapsing donors, winning back lapsed donors is critical to an organization's growth. The long-term value of a recaptured donor is usually better than that of a new donor. In addition, the cost to recapture a lapsed donor is less than the cost to acquire a new donor. And one of the boards I served on, we would look at the lapsed donors report and decide who would follow up with whom. So that's another report that we recommend you run. So this is, I wanted to ask everyone, just put in the chat how many of you currently have a recapture program. Just say yes or no if you have one or not. And again, this is one of those things that, this could be different based on your organization. What does lapsed mean for you? At what point are you re-engaging them? Generally, you would want to review your donor file and gift history and include the following categories of donors from your recapture program. Donors who have given, whose last gift was at 60 plus months ago. These individuals will likely draw a lower response. If they've only had one gift or perhaps tribute gifts, that's a little lower response. The size of the gift could factor into that as well. Think about those factors as you are segmenting and building your report. And once you've narrowed your file, you can begin to identify the donor groups that will be included in your recapture program. The next one is sharing financial outcomes. Of course, this is a lot of our customers we find their accountants aren't necessarily working in the database, but you want to be able to share your financial outcomes with them. So for proper reconciliation, or perhaps you have board members who aren't, or other stakeholders who aren't logging into your database, but you want them to be kept up to date on your financial outcomes. Like you could have a weekly deposit report for your reconciliation. You can schedule this to automatically be sent out to your finance team. And remember, they don't have to have a Bloomerang login to be able to view those spreadsheets. Another thing that we like to have is a fiscal year comparison report, comparing the revenue from your organizations and individuals for the last 2 fiscal years. You can even extend this up to 5 years. We have a report template here as well that takes a look at loyal donors. So taking a look at revenue from individuals who have given every year within a 5-year period. You can take a look at this report. You can define your parameters. What are each of the 5 years that you're taking a look at? Or if it's less than 5 years, you can customize that and see how you're doing, retaining them year over year. Another report I love for that is we have a report template for projected revenue or projected cash flow. So this takes a look at has any projected revenue this fiscal year. So this mainly looks at, do you have any pledges or recurring donations that you were supposed to collect on projected revenue this year? And how are we doing on the actual collections? So you can see here for my organization, for example, our projected revenue for this year is 46,000. We've collected on 6,000 of those. And you can monitor this on monthly, quarterly basis, which helps you keep track and keep you in line with your goals to make sure you're going to meet those at the end of the fiscal year. And there's so much more, right? You could do a daily task report, donors who are going to lapse next month, constituents whose profile was updated, any transactions that were edited for finance, if you have birthdays coming up, if you have pledge reminders coming up, any report that you can think of that can make your life easier, if that insight just gets into your inbox, you can schedule that. And please do, right? You want to work smarter, not harder. Build those reports once and get those insights into your inbox as frequently as you need. Now, to wrap, scheduled reports can help automate your organization's fundraising strategy. So you can spend that time on donor engagement and cultivation and retention instead of having to keep running those reports over and over. And you can also send information to people who don't log into Bloomerang or who don't use reports. And if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat, please. I did want to point out, again, everyone's going to receive a copy of these slides. So we have some templates here that you can use if you're using Bloomerang, or you can adapt to whatever CRM you're using, and some additional resources as well that you can take a look at and use for your organization. And while we have you here, I just have a poll I want to ask. If you would like a follow-up on how Bloomerang can help your organization, please let us know in the poll. If you change your mind, that's okay too. You know how to reach us. But that kind of wraps up our content for the day. I know we covered a lot. I hope this gives you a good starting point of what reports you might take a look at and how you can automate your processes. And I did want to show, we do have a promo. Sorry, that was hidden. We do have a promo for September. So you have about 3 days to take advantage of this offer. You can buy Bloomerang now and not have to pay until 2023. So again, this is until September 30th for a limited time only. When you buy Bloomerang, we'll delay your first payment until January 2023. So this expires September 30th. And it applies to new Bloomerang customers. If you're unsure, again, the link is in the slides, and you can get more information there and sign up to receive more information that way. Lovely. Taking a look at the questions here. Yes, everyone will receive a copy of, or everyone will receive an email with a link to the recording and the slides. And you are welcome, Dale. Thank you. We hope that this has been very helpful for you. We hope that this gives you, again, a starting point of what are those reports that we may want to run? How can we automate that process so we can use that time elsewhere? Thank you again, everybody. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you in another webinar soon. Bye.